welcome back. It's Michelle from Made by Michi here. Today I'm going to be making 2 cards using the May box from the Hedgehog Hollow. This month's box is filled with nothing but musical goodies. And it's a fantastic box. There are 2 stamp sets that you get with it, a large stamp set and a small stamp set, and they are both filled with some absolutely beautiful sentiments and some wonderful images. Lots of different music instruments, musical notes, lots of good stuff. You get 2 stencils. The guitar stencil is actually a bonus for regular monthly subscribers this month, and then you also get a piano stencil. And the good thing with their stencils is you get both the positive and the negative with them, so you can do some really fun and cool stuff with both of those pieces. And then you also get 2 packs of ephemera included in the box. Excuse me, something fell there. One of them is the main image, and then the other one is your shadow, and they're all black and white, which means the black part of all of the ephemera is all completely foilable. But you can also just leave them as is, layer them up, and then you will get a really fine detailed black outline around the one image. So for my first card, I'm actually going to use the piano stencil. Now I did spray the back of it with some temporary spray adhesive, because it does have the really fine pieces to it. I didn't want any of them moving around on me when I did my ink blending. So I just got out my Misty stamping positioner to make sure that I had that lined up all straight on the edge of my paper. Added some post-it tape to the side of it just so I didn't get any ink on the rest of the card from the ink blending. And I used 2 different distress oxides for this. Instead of just having all black, I went in with a black and a blue. I first started with the black soot, and then I went in with the chipped sapphire. Now, normally with ink blending, you would go around in a circle so that you don't get any harsh lines or anything. But because of the way this stencil is, it has the very fine, small piano key parts. I didn't want a chance of those moving around at all, even though it does have the spray adhesive on the back of it. So to do my ink blending for this, I just kind of brush side to side along the length of the piano keys until I had a nice even blend. So then I carefully removed the stencil from it, and I went in to do some heat embossing. Now, I also chose the piano ephemera, and I placed that on my card front exactly where I wanted it. And I chose my sentiment. I went back and forth between 2 different sentiments. The first one that I thought of using is, it says, every memory has its own soundtrack. But I kind of went back and forth. I placed that on there. I wasn't quite sure if I liked how it looked on there. So in the end, I decided on the other one in the smaller stamp set, which says make your own kind of music. And it just fit on there absolutely perfectly. Exactly where I wanted it. So I got up my Misty stamping position again, put my cardstock all in there, put my piano back on there so I could place this sentiment exactly where I wanted it. Removed the piano, and then because I was going to be doing some heat embossing, I brushed a little anti-static powder on my cardstock. And also it would help just in case my Distress ink oxide inks were still a little bit wet. It would help to prevent any stray embossing powder where I didn't want it. I added my sentiment and just added a piece of black cardstock or whatever behind it, just to make sure that I had the sentiment lined up straight, because it's kind of hard to see on the clear lid. And then I went in and heat embossed it using the Maker Forte Color Hive clear embossing ink pad. And then I used my ink smusher from Maker Forte, which is fantastic. This tool is amazing. It is so comfortable in the hand. It looks big, but it's really comfortable, and it's perfect for getting a nice, clear, even impression. And then I just heat embossed it with a little bit of platinum embossing powder. Now, I did do the heat embossing off camera, so you didn't have to watch that. And then I added some foam tape to the back of my cardstock, added a little tape on the inside of my card just to hold it flat while I added my card front on. And because I didn't add foam tape over the whole part, there were some pieces that were kind of sinking in a bit, so I just added a little bit more foam tape to the edges where it was going a little wonky. So to finish this card, once I had all that done, I added my piano ephemera back to the front of it with a little bit of foam tape as well. And then I added a few blue gems, the crown jewel gems from Maker Forte, The blue ones that I use today are called, oh my goodness, I forget the name of them. Vegas Strip, I do believe that they are called. And it's a really, really nice blue. You kind of get, it's a reflection of other colors in it. It's kind of like a peacock kind of blue. And they matched perfectly with the rest of the card. It was just that little bit extra that it needed. And that was it for this card. I added a few of the gems to the lid just so it was easier to pick them up. And I used the On the Hook rainbow tweezers from Maker Forte. And these tweezers, it has a curved tip to them, so they're absolutely perfect for picking up little gems, little sequins, jewels, anything little like that. These pick up those perfectly. And that was it for this card. I kind of like how it came out, nice and clean and classic and simple. And so for my second card today, I am actually using the guitar stencil. And this one I am making into a slimline card. Now this one, because even though it doesn't have any small detail pieces like the piano stencil does, I still sprayed the back of it with a little bit of adhesive, just so it would stay in place and wouldn't move around on me. I used my Misty stamp positioner again just to make sure that I had the stencil lined up nice and straight on my cardstock. And then I went in with 2 different brown distress inks because I wanted this to have a more classic guitar feel to it, acoustic guitar. So I used Vintage Photo and Gathered Twigs, and I first went in with the Vintage Photo, the lighter of the 2 inks. And then I went around with Gathered Twigs, and I concentrated that more around the edges of the guitar and a little bit darker on the one side. And then once I had that all done, I kind of lost the footage of the stamping. But what I did, I took all these small musical instruments, or some of them, from the larger stamp set, and I stamped them. I left the stencil in place because I wanted to have the instruments all on the inside of all on the guitar part, and just in case any overlapped on the outside, I left the stencil in place and did some stamping within the stencil. And then I just added and filled in the rest of it with the small little music notes. Not quite sure what happened to that part of my video footage, but I lost that somehow. And so for this one, for the sentiment, I heat embossed the sentiment on some heavyweight vellum. And the sentiment that I chose for that one was Music Feeds the Soul. So I went in with my black Versamark ink pad, and that ink pad is perfect for it because it stays wet long enough. And then I went over top of it with some clear embossing powder so it would be nice and black. I heat embossed that, and then I trimmed it down. Always with vellum, you want to make sure, well, anytime you're heat embossing, make sure your heat gun is nice and hot before, but especially on vellum because you don't want to warp the vellum at all. So as hot as possible as you can get your heat gun before you go in and heat the powder. So once that was done, I trimmed down my sentiment and added it to my guitar stenciled panel. I wrapped it around the edges of it and then just secured it in the back with some Scotch tape. Now this sentiment, I didn't plan it this way when I picked it, but the music word in it absolutely fit it perfectly. I kind of did a little happy dance when I saw how perfectly that it fit in that exact spot on the guitar. I was pretty happy. I didn't plan it that way, but it worked out perfectly. So again, I just folded around the back of it, secured it with some Scotch tape, and that was it. Now, because I wanted the top panel to stand out just a little bit from my card base, I did cut 2 very thin strips of a shiny black cardstock, mirror cardstock, I guess you would call that, and just added them to each of the sides of my stenciled piece with just a little bit of glue, just so I got that really fine detail outline of on the sides of it. And then I trimmed down any excess that was hanging off the edge of it, off the top. And I added it to my card base. Now for this card, I had the guitar piece trimmed to 3.5 by 8 inches because my slimline card base was going to be 4 by 8 inches. I wanted the sides to be 1/4 inch shorter on either side. So for this one again, I used my foam tape to pop it up on the back. So I just outlined all the sides and the top of it with a little bit of foam tape, and I made sure that I added foam tape on all the sides this time so I didn't have to go back and correct that like I did with the last card. And sorry, the measurements for my first card, it's a regular A2 size card. So the card base end is 4¼ by 5½ inches, and on my stencil piece, it was trimmed down to 4 by 5.25 inches. Now to finish off this card, even though it is more masculine feeling, I still want to add a little bit more to it, but I didn't want anything glittery or shiny. So I grabbed a few black pearls, just kind of added them, kind of a scattering on there if you want to call it, and then that was that for that card. I absolutely love how these cards turned out, more kind of simple and classic. I absolutely love them. Thank you so very much for joining me today. Don't forget to hit that like, that subscribe button down below, and let me know what you think. Have a great day. Bye.